All right, we're going to change this up a little bit. Morning again, and thanks for being here. We're going to talk a little bit about leadership this morning, and we're going to start off with a message from Joe Vaughn. He was originally scheduled to give this talk, and he unfortunately had to spend a few days in the hospital, but thankfully he's doing fine now, and he's healthy, and we'll be back in action this week, but not able to travel. But he is a student at the University of Georgia, outstanding student, making wonderful contributions, and hopefully will have a very, very long and successful career in the forest products industry. So with no further ado, we'll start off and hear from him.
Good morning, and thank you for attending our discussion on leadership programs in Georgia. I regret that I cannot be there in person with you, but want to thank my colleagues at the University of Georgia and GFA for making it possible for me to speak to you via this recorded video. My name is Joseph Vaughn, and I'm currently an undergraduate student at Warnell, the School of Forestry and Natural Resources, studying forestry. This summer, I had the opportunity to be an intern with the Georgia Forestry Association. Under the supervision of Andres Villegas, the president and CEO of the association, I was given two core projects. The first was to establish and launch a grassroots initiative known as the Forest Resource Team. The Forest Resource Team's purpose is creating forestry-specific relationships between our association members and elected officials, focusing largely on urbanized areas throughout our state. Our goal is to have volunteers reach out via letter, phone calls, or public events a few times a year so that our elected officials can place a face to the forestry community. My second core project was to conduct a benchmark study on various leadership development programs in Georgia. As the Georgia Forestry Association considers how to best grow champions for forestry across the state, we thought we should look to established and well-respected programs that have been focused on developing leaders by giving them the experience, knowledge, and confidence to make a difference in their communities. I've been fortunate to learn about advancing Georgia's leaders in agriculture and forestry, Leadership Georgia, and the Institute of Georgia's Environmental Leadership, and look forward to Andres sharing my findings with you. My career goal is to become a superintendent of a national forest or national park. A successful superintendent is continuously developing leadership skills with the knowledge they gain from the people around them, experience through the application of best management practices, and being confident enough to lead from either the front of the room or the back. Thank you for attending our talk this morning, and hope you all find our presentation informative.
All right, that's Joe, and I wish you could be here. Thank you. Appreciate that. And I especially want to say thank you to the Warnell School and Dr. Dale Green, who made that video possible. I think I got that video from your IT team at 1:53 a.m. on Friday morning. They moved hard and fast to make sure that they could have their student in front of you today. So thank you so much, Dr. Green, and the entire faculty and staff at the Warnell School of Forestry and Natural Resources. So I'm going to try and do Joe justice by talking to you about a lot of the things that he's had his head in at least 50% of the time while he's been our intern over the past few weeks. We're going to talk about some of the common best practices and leadership programs. And why is this important to us? Because ultimately, it's the leadership that where we lead, others follow. And that's very important for us. And if you think about our local tax assessors and the tax commissions at the county level, what happens if there was never anyone in there that knew about forestry, that knew about agriculture? What do you think would happen to our land values and how we get taxed, right? What do you think would happen in our state assembly if we didn't have a Chuck Williams, a Chad Nimmer, all those other people throughout decades that have represented our interests and could explain to them what it means to have, how important private property rights are, what it means to have a pipeline threatening to take your land, what it means to all these other things that are so critical to us. If we don't have leaders that can talk to that, we're in a much weaker position, and our assets are exposed. So no matter what level of business or government, we've got to have leaders. And as we think about the future of our foundation and the future of the things that we want to do, this has been part of the discussion. So we wanted to go out and talk to folks who have been developing leaders for a long time. The leadership programs that we looked at they aren't new, and they've been trying to address leadership vacuums or leadership opportunities in Georgia for several years. Now, when I told Joe let's go out and take a look at this, I really wanted him to focus on three things, and this is what I brought from Weyerhaeuser. The senior vice president of Weyerhaeuser, Denise Merle, for human resources and investor relations, she said, Andres, there's three things that make a great leader in your experience in development. She said about 40 to 60% of it comes from experience. I mean, we know we learn by doing, and that's both failure and success. Maybe failures are the ones that hurt the most and the ones we remember the most, but we learn by doing. And that's a key component, experience, right? Problem solving, real world issues. The planer went down, the grapple's broken. We had a hurricane come through. All these things are real world issues. The digester's having an issue. All these things we learn by doing, we learn by fixing. And so experience is a huge part of where leadership comes from. But there's also another key part of that too, and that's knowledge. And that's partly just learning, the facts and data, the real world that's out there, so that when someone is talking to you and telling you something, are they taking me down the wrong path because it's good for them but not good for me? So just that intellectual curiosity and that industrial curiosity of knowing your business is a huge part of that. And that's knowledge, facts and data, things that you can prove. And then the last component is confidence. Now, you'll find a lot of people in this world that might have those two components up there, knowledge and experience. But when it comes time to step up, raise your hand and be that voice for anything. A lot of times people are scared, and confidence is all about taking action without fear. And that might be the hardest part of this. And to me, the heart of confidence starts with trust. It can be really hard to get up and talk to people about anything if they don't trust you and you don't trust them. And so a certain element of trust is what helps us grow confidence in our ability to go out there and make a difference. So I asked Joe, as we looked at these three programs, Leadership Georgia, iGel, and Advancing Georgia's Leaders in Agriculture and Forestry program, how do they focus in on the knowledge, experience, and confidence that we need to know that we develop it throughout our industry and through their programs with the folks that they work with. One of the key components is let's start with the folks who have the best opportunities to take what we can give them and do something with it. So one of the key components is they select programs that have high potential, high performing individuals, folks that are motivated, that are driven, that want to make a difference, that will go that little bit of an extra mile, that may have studied something different. Diversity is a key component of this too as well. If we're all the same, we're going to all come and end up at the same conclusion. Well, sometimes problems are way more complex than that, as we all know from having to solve them in the real world, right? What works at one sawmill may not work at another one. And that's a technology and process issue. But what happens in policy in Washington State or Oregon certainly may not work here. So diversity of thought, diversity of experience, diversity of background is very important. And those are things that we see there. But ultimately, what they really want to be able to give folks is just a deeper understanding of issues. We can operate at the higher levels, but really problem solving for us requires that discipline to be able to get deeper into an issue. So discipline being a key component of that. So there's kind of common best practices that Joe was able to uncover as we look through these different programs. Where one, the mission and vision of the organizations tend to be, skewed to one side of another, of either creating a lot of knowledge. So we're going to just inundate you with facts and knowledge and data about what's happening out there in the world, about an industry or society in general, or we're gonna focus more so on creating a really strong network for you. So when you need to know something about taxes, or you need to know something about water, or you need to know something about charitable giving, or you need to know something about all these different things that are out there, the state's trade or ports or whatever it may be, that you've got a place to go to find that information, and you feel comfortable enough to pick up the phone and engage with those folks. The other thing about it is also multi-session programs. You don't hit a home run every time you get at bat, right? And the idea of having the multi-session programs allows you to do a couple things, and talk about a lot of different issues and have a good broad spectrum of items out there that you want to expose people to. So once again, going back to knowledge. But more importantly, when you're in a cohort of people that may not all think like you, look like you, be from your exact same background, things like that. One of the things of spending a lot of time with them is that you start to build that trust. You start to break down those barriers of someone in Decatur could never understand what we do in Camden County or Lowndes County or Eccles County, or vice versa, right? Somebody works in a glass tower in Atlanta may not ever understand what happens in the rural parts of the state. You start by having that forced interaction of being together over multiple periods of time, sharing experiences, sharing stories, understanding what's in the heart of other people and what drives them. You start to build that trust, and you start to understand, maybe I have a different perspective on what it means to cut a tree or plant peanuts and worry about drought or floods or all these other things, right? Maybe I have a different perspective of what it means I sit in 2 hours of traffic every day trying to get to my office and not getting to spend the time I need with my family. All those things are things that are built from those multi-session experiences. And so that goes back to that trust factor and that confidence factor. And then, one of the things that they tend to focus in on a lot is political structures and industry structures. How is forest products different than agriculture, for example? How is manufacturing jets different from manufacturing lumber? How is trade affecting us in certain industries versus others? So really understanding political structures and industry structures are important. And then also, where are we at? What are the things that we're struggling with in terms of emerging issues? Once again, back to the ag example, how do we address water issues in agriculture versus forestry or golf courses or nurseries or all these other things? So having a breadth of scope on one single issue from multiple different angles provides a lot of enrichment for the participants. And that's kind of in structure. Around people, one of the most key components is company support. If you don't have sponsorship from your boss to go do these types of things, or from your company, it's going to be really hard to get it done. You're taking time away from your everyday office responsibilities to go do other things, and that requires endorsement. There's also a cost associated with all these programs. So endorsement from your company is very important. We already talked about the high potential performing individuals. You want to pick the best you can find. And diversity of thought, culture, and experience is critical too as well to have that enriched experience. That network is the other component. Knowing where you can go to get an answer is an essential element of a lot of these things. And then having that diverse group of opinions is important too as well. Pushing people, ultimately what this is about, is pushing people out of their comfort zone. It's really easy in life to sit in your cave and look out every once in a while and peek around and say, oh, they're doing all those things wrong, or whatever. If I had to do it this way, it's a whole heck of a lot harder to walk out of that cave into the sunlight, pick up tools, and build the world you want to see, the world you want to live in outside of that cave, so to speak, right? So from that perspective, that diverse group of opinions helps push people out of their comfort zone and think about how do we fix, how do we build, how do we grow in ways that work for a lot of people beyond just me. Very important. And then the reality. Like I said, there's nothing like going to see it, touch it, feel it, smell it, do it. And when we were, I was very fortunate to be able to go through Leadership Georgia, and we did some charitable activities with groups and communities that I'd never thought I'd have any engagement with. But what stuck with me so much was as I went, I remember one of them was the Boys and Girls Club in Albany. I think Marshall Thomas, if you're here, I know you've been very supportive of that. Thank you for that leadership. But everywhere I went around the world in my career after that, I took that experience with me. And in Uruguay, when I was there, I was so happy that we could do similar projects, and I could learn about what F&W was even doing down there to model programs like the Boys and Girls Club to help people. When I lived in Corvallis, Oregon, the Boys and Girls Club was about 3 blocks from my house. It was amazing to see their facility. It's palatial. It wasn't a rundown old high school gym that was built in the 1940s like I was used to seeing here. It was one of these places that people could go see. So those experiences of seeing it, touching it, and then being able to go apply that and compare that to the rest of the world throughout your life are really, really influential. And so that experience of being able to take people to see things and do things and being immersed is important. And then the other component is, it's not about looking out all the time. It's about looking in a lot too as well. We're all wired differently. We all react to the world differently. Some of us, as we know, in an office setting, you got the guy that blows up and you got the person that never says anything, right? And you got these two spectrums out there. Making people take a personality test and look at themselves and think about how they operate is maybe one of the most powerful things that you can ever do. And sometimes, you'll in a big group of people, you'll have somebody that'll break down and start, they'll get emotional and say, wow, I never knew this about myself, but now I understand why I got divorced. Or now I understand why my kids don't talk to me. That's maybe on the bad side, right? Maybe they'll understand on the upper side, and on the other side, now I understand why my dad and I got along so well, or my grandparents and I got along so well, or all these other things, right? Those are powerful, very, very powerful exercises. And if you haven't done them, you might want some guided help in those, but they're very, very good way for you to think about how you, over time, can understand yourself and become a better, more powerful, more efficient, more impactful person. So those are elements that we saw that were kind of common best practices across the programs. So we're very fortunate that we've had a lot of people in our industry, Mr. Stone being one of those that has been through these programs. And Joe Vaughn reached out to a variety of different folks, and we decided to pick on Brian because he had, we've always found Brian to be a very thoughtful person, and he can provide some good feedback. And, in these three spaces of knowledge, experience, and confidence, Brian told us in knowledge that ability to learn about other industries and organizations and how they're structured gave him different perspective on us and the forest products industry. And the experience, looking at how other folks, he went through the Agri Leaders program, or AGL program, sorry, how trends in agriculture and the issues facing agriculture are different than how we handle them on the forestry side oftentimes was helpful. And on the confidence side, once again, just that self-realization. To understand that the world isn't like me. I may look at the world a certain way, but the rest of the world doesn't always look at the world I do, the way I do. And that just brings you closer to them. And a lot of our lives, part of our job is to help people solve their own problems. When folks around you are doing better, you tend to do better. And when it comes to policy and legislation, that holds true too as well. You got to find ways to help them carry their own water sometimes. And so, which goes back to GFA's role, right? So that self-realization helps people be confident in their roles. So that's a little bit about what Joe found in his research project. He did a very good job, very commendable work. And then, we think about where we want to go and how that translates back to the Georgia Forestry Association. How can we do things? Well, as we talk about, as I mentioned in my last presentation, building a foundation that can grow leaders that are champions inside our own industry. Start at home, just like Jeannie Conley mentioned to us. Start at home first. Let's build our own leaders, right? Well, we need your support for that. And so one way that we can do that is supporting the Georgia Forestry Foundation, so that we have our new programs on the horizon that focus in on making the best of what we got. So we have folks throughout the state that are champions for the things that we believe in. And then the second elements are exactly what Garrett mentioned. The Emerging Leaders Program for us has been a great way for folks to be exposed to one another in our own industry and be engaged in different things. If you're a company, sponsor someone to do that. Give them that flexibility, that leash to do something. When we hire people and we tell them your job is to sit in that chair and do a job and don't do anything else, we're limiting ourselves by doing that. And a lot of big companies sometimes do that. So let's make sure we take the best and brightest and give them those opportunities to grow. And then, hopefully where we'd love to be able to be in the future is taking our own leaders and pumping them into these other leadership programs throughout Georgia. That is our opportunity for future leaders in Leadership Georgia. If you look at all those elected officials at the congressional level, governors, they've all been through Leadership Georgia. How powerful would it be for them to have a relationship through them? They go through these programs with folks that are champions for forestry that can explain to them why Georgia's number one in this industry and why it needs to stay there and what they can do, so that 15 years from now or 20 years when they are governor and they've got an issue, or they're a U.S. senator or they're a U.S. congressman and they've got an issue, they pick up the phone and they talk to that person, that they have that confidence of having spent 4 or 5 10 program sessions in Leadership Georgia with, or 8 program sessions in IGEL, or multiple program sessions in AgriLeaders. All these things move the dial for us over time. So those are ways that we all can support the future of our industry in a meaningful way that makes a difference. So with that, I'll turn it over to our next speaker. Thank you very much.